This is how you're going to open all files whenever you open a file with Photoshop. You want to locate your JPG file either on your desktop or in your drive, and click on it and then drag it down to the Photoshop icon and then let go. And it should then open up in Photoshop. And you'll know that you did it right by, if you look at this little icon right here, there is no sub icon within that frame. And that means that you've opened the file correctly. I'm going to show you a couple of basic features to use in Photoshop. To summarize what we're going to be doing in this little video tutorial, you'll learn how to crop an image, rotate an image, adjust the contrast of an image, and then save the image again as a .jpg. And so that's what we're going to cover in this brief tutorial. So I'm going to start with how to rotate an image. So in Photoshop, you'll see that we open these two files, and remember we open them by dragging them from your flash drive into the Photoshop icon. And I can tell I did that right because there's no little sub icon in this window. I can just see the picture right here. This is my layers panel. If you ever open Photoshop and you don't see the panels that you thought you should see, you want to always go to Window, Workspace, Essentials. And if you're already in Essentials but it doesn't look like how it's supposed to, you want to go to Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials, because sometimes there's a lot of people that use these computers and sometimes things will get changed. Libraries we're not going to do a lot with in this class, and it takes up some valuable real estate, so usually what I do is I click and drag it out, which then causes it to disappear. So back to rotating an image. So if you have an image that is sideways and you need it to be the right orientation, you're going to go to Image, Image Rotation, and then either 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise depending on what you need. And so in my case I need it to go clockwise, so I'll click that, and just like that it'll snap to where it needs to be. Okay, so this is the second part of the tutorial, and this will be showing you how you can crop an image. And we're actually going to do that to the second image here, so I'm going to click on the little tab, which will take me to the second image. And I always recommend that students, when you're new to Photoshop, use the 2-line option here. So I clicked on these little arrows right here in order to make it so that the toolbar has 2 lines, because it's easier to find the tools that way. So we're going to go to the crop tool, and if I hover over it without clicking on my mouse, it'll say crop tool. It also looks like 2 L's kind of overlapping one another. And this will show up on your screen, and you can either just click and drag out a new window, which will make it smaller, or you can click and drag in the existing handles. So when I hover my mouse over the corner, it'll show me that I can drag it out. And this is for if I have no constraints up here. Okay. Sometimes if someone else used the crop tool, they may have saved some constraints in here. You can always press clear to get rid of those. But you also might want to use constraints, because if you want all of your images to be cropped to a certain size so that they fit nicely into your book, then you could do that up here by choosing like square or 5x7. You can also, if I actually want this to be rotated, I can press these little arrows to switch it, and then that will crop my image appropriately. And so once I decide on a crop that I want, I just double click within the crop arrow, and then that will crop my image. And then if I go to my other file here and I still have my crop tool enabled, then you can see that it is going to show me the same size, and I can move it. I can click and drag to move it around. Now this would be the case if I wanted all my images to be exactly the same orientation and size. I would use this. So if I drag my image down here, what I'm usually looking for in the crops, and this has it showing up here, these rule of third grid lines. Sometimes you try to get the center of focus to be at one of these. In this image that I have, it's all very centered, okay? Which then makes the composition very static, and that's an okay thing to have a static composition in some cases. But in other cases, you'd want to have a dynamic composition, which would be more positioning the image so that you're having it be off to the side a little bit more. So I'm trying to put that tombstone-like shape at one of the intersections of the rule of thirds. And that creates a really nice kind of walk-in here, but that is going to cause me a little bit of a page layout conundrum when I get to my page layout, because I've got some images like this one that are long and skinny, although I could potentially change this. I'm just pressing Command Z to undo that, but it's still not quite doing what I want it to do. So I'm going to drag this out, and now click and drag. Also, what I'm doing here is I'm rotating it. I can tell that I'm able to rotate because it puts an arrow, a double-sided curved arrow, as my cursor, and then I know I can rotate it. So I might want to, because the horizon line is quite off on this, so I might want to rotate this image so that I can see that the horizon line is a little more straight across the image, and double click. And that kind of looks nice. So now I've got these two images, although one is horizontally oriented and another one is vertically oriented, and that's okay. If I want this bubble to go away because that's sort of distracting, I always just go back to the Move tool. I always say that Move tool is the home base in Photoshop, so you can go back to that. The last part of the tutorial, and I'm going to show you how you can adjust the contrast of an image, which is another basic feature that you can use in Photoshop. So I'm going to, for this, I need to be in Photoshop. You can see how sometimes, because I'm using QuickTime to record this, it was showing QuickTime across the top, but as soon as I clicked on the actual Photoshop document, then it said Photoshop across the top. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast, and click on that, which will then pull up this window where I can drag back and forth, and I can increase the contrast slightly. And what I'm trying to do is just find a position where the image starts to kind of pop and seem a little bit more three-dimensional, but that none of the areas are blown out. Like these footprints are starting to become a little blown out here, so I'd want to tone down that brightness just a touch so that I don't start to see overexposure in this area, because that seems to be the lightest part of my image. And so once it feels like it's a good amount of brightness and contrast, I can click OK. Now you'll notice that when I did this editing, there is no additional layer that was added to this. This is called destructive editing, and what that does is it's actually altering the pixels, and you can never get those pixels back to the way they were originally. So just know that when you're adjusting in this way, you kind of have to make sure you're doing it right the first time, and you can't just keep adding more contrast later, because it will eventually degrade the quality of your image. The other way to create adjustments of this nature is to actually create an adjustment layer, which works really well in a situation like this where I want to apply the adjustment to the entire image. And so what I can do is you'll see that it says brightness contrast as that very first one. And if I click on that, then now see it actually added an extra layer, and then it opened the properties up here instead of over here where they were before. And I can click and I can drag. The nice thing about editing in this way is that I can later just if I decide I don't like that adjustment for whatever reason, I can highlight it and then click on the little trash can that will delete that layer. I can delete it. Oh, sorry, I had the wrong, let me press Command Z. So what I had highlighted was this little image right here, which is actually the mask, which we will talk about in a later project. So I actually need to have my little brackets around this shape here and then press my trash can, and now you'll see that that layer deleted entirely. Okay, so it matters what thing within the layer you have selected as to what gets deleted. Are you deleting the mask or are you actually deleting the entire layer? Okay, so that's two ways that you can do adjustments. One is destructive editing, where the pixels actually change, and the other one is editing that you'll be able to change and delete and do other things with later. The disadvantage of that is that it affects everything. So if you're working on several layers, and you'll find this to be a problem in later projects, but not likely for this project that we're working on. I'm going to show you how you can save these files in order to submit them to get credit for having done this tutorial. And this will also be the same way that you will save your own files once you crop and color adjust them, so that you can import them into your InDesign book. So what you're going to do, and then you're going to select a location. So maybe you'll put them on the desktop, maybe you'll put them directly into your flash drive, either way, and you're going to click Save. Then the second screen is going to open up, and it will probably default to having it be 12 quality, which is a good quality to have it set at. I wouldn't usually, for any of the assignments for this class, go lower than 10. Sometimes you want smaller file sizes if you're going to be saving an image on the web, because it will make it load faster for viewers of your web page. But for print output, you really want to use the highest quality possible for the appropriate size. And so I can see that it's 952.1K, which is not gigantic, so that's perfect. Even at 12 quality, it's 2.4 megabytes, so that also is not gigantic. I can then click OK. You can just leave these as their default setting, which in my case was progressive. If yours is something different, just leave it at that, because it's usually responding to how the file already is, and you just kind of want to leave it where it already is. And then you press OK, and then it will show up wherever you told it to be. And then for the tutorial assignment, you're actually going to upload that file into our Turn-In Drive folder. So once you've completed these files, you're going to go to File, Save As, and then you're going to title the document last name underscore first name underscore 01 underscore PS dash A and then a 1. And then you can make sure it's in the JPEG format, and then click Save. And then click OK. And then you'll do the same thing for the next file, but this one you'll call A2. So that's last name underscore first name underscore 01 underscore PS dash A2. And then both of these, and I'll double check that it's a JPEG, and then I can click Save. And then on this one, I want to just leave it at the highest quality and click OK. And then where you're going to put these files is into the Turn-In folder in the drive. There's a subfolder in there called 01, which has a subfolder called Workshops, which has a subfolder called PSA, and you want to put it into that PSA folder. And then you'll put both of those files into that same folder, and then you'll get credit for having completed this workshop.